Have you ever been in a situation where people thought they were smarter than you, but in reality, they were playing right into your hands? That's exactly what happened to me when my local HOA decided to mess with the wrong person. And let me tell you this, when you mess with someone's land, their livelihood, and their peace, you're asking for trouble. But when that someone happens to be me with more patience, resources, and determination than they ever imagined, you better be ready for a story that doesn't end well for you. It all started with a letter. A simple, cold, official-looking piece of paper that was slipped into my mailbox one morning. At first, I thought it was the usual nonsense. Another HOA complained about something that didn't even matter. Maybe they thought my fence was the wrong shade of brown, or maybe my truck parked on a gravel driveway wasn't aesthetic enough for their liking. But when I opened it, my hands tightened on the page. This wasn't just another complaint. It was a notice saying that my 2,000 acres of land had been in my family for generations, was being evaluated for community use, and that the HOA was taking steps to put on the market. Excuse me? They were trying to sell my land? You gotta understand, this wasn't some small backyard. This wasn't a corner lot or a simple garden. We're talking about 2,000 acres of rolling fields, lakes, trails, and historic ground. This was land my grandfather had worked on, land I had built my entire life around. And yet, these so-called HOA leaders thought they had the right to sweep in and act like it was theirs, like I had no say in the matter. Here's the part that really burned me. They framed it as if they were doing the community a favor. The land is underutilized, they wrote. It would be better managed under the HOA's direction, with potential development opportunities to increase property values. Can you believe that? They wanted to rip apart my family's heritage for a quick profit, just to make their neighborhood homes worth a little more on paper. But instead of losing my temper, instead of storming into their next meeting and yelling at the top of my lungs, I smiled, because I already knew if they wanted to play games, I had the money, the strategy, and the willpower to play bigger. From that moment on, it wasn't just about keeping my land. It was about showing them a lesson they'd never forget. See, the HOA had power in their neighborhood. They had rules, they had fines, they had their little committees and board members who thought they could control everything. But what they didn't have was vision. They couldn't see past their own backyards. They couldn't imagine someone like me turning the tables on them. They thought I was just another landowner they could push around. They had no idea I was 10 steps ahead. The first thing I did was gather every document, every deed, every historical record tied to my property. I wanted to make sure there was no loophole, no forgotten law that could give them an inch of ground. And let me tell you, my family kept everything. Old files, signed agreements, land surveys that went back over 100 years. My land wasn't just property. It was practically a living museum of history. There was no way an HOA could legally claim it, no matter how much paperwork they tried to fake. But here's the thing. I didn't want to just protect myself. That wasn't enough. I want to make sure this HOA never had the chance to pull something like this on anyone else. And I wanted to hit them where it hurt, their pride, their wallets, and their control. So I started showing up to meetings. Not to argue, not to fight, but to listen. I sat in the back, calm, quiet, patient. And every time they brought up my land, I took notes. Every time they whispered about potential buyers or community development projects, I paid close attention. I didn't interrupt. I didn't give away my hand. Because the best way to win is to let your opponent believe they're winning, right up until the moment you pull the rug from under them. And oh, was I preparing to pull that rug. Now here's a little detail they didn't expect. While they were busy trying to find buyers for my acres, I was quietly finding out more about them. I started digging, not on my land, but into their lives, their finances, their neighborhood. Who owned what? Who was in debt? Who was on shaky ground with their mortgage? Who was barely holding on to their property because of rising HOA fees? You see where I'm going with this? Because while they were plotting to sell what wasn't theirs, I was plotting something far bigger, buying everything that was theirs. They thought they had the upper hand, but I was about to show them what real power looked like. And let me tell you this, when the day came, when I finally revealed my move, the shock on their faces was worth every second of patience. They had no idea how badly They had underestimated me. But before I tell you what I did next, let me leave you with this. Never, ever try to take what belongs to someone who built their life on it. Because sometimes the fight you pick is the one you can't possibly win. Backhand index pointing right. If you want to know how I turned their own neighborhood into my victory trophy, stick around for the next part. The best part of the story is just getting started. Have you ever watched someone dig their own hole and keep digging deeper, completely unaware that you're standing right there with the shovel they thought was theirs? That's exactly how it felt as the HOA tried to sell my land. They thought they were powerful, but they were blind to the bigger picture. And I was about to show them just how dangerous it is to underestimate someone who refuses to be controlled. While they wasted months writing proposals and sending emails to potential buyers, I was quietly working on something far greater. I had one goal: buy out their entire neighborhood. And trust me, once I had that vision in my mind, nothing was going to stop me. See, HOAs love to talk about community. But behind the curtain, their community was a mess. Half the people in the neighborhood hated the board, but were too scared to speak out. Some homeowners were drowning in HOA fines they couldn't afford. Others were secretly behind on their mortgages. And a few were even looking to sell, desperate to get out before things got worse. The board members thought they were in total control, but the truth? Their little empire was cracking, and I was ready to strike. I started small. One property here, another there. At first, no one even noticed. I bought through shell companies, quiet deals, private negotiations. I wasn't showing up with a big announcement. I was building silently, brick by brick, deed by deed. And every house I bought was another piece of their kingdom slipping right out from under them. But let me tell you the best part. Because I had the resources, I didn't have to haggle. When a struggling homeowner saw my offer, it was like a lifeline. No more HOA harassment, no more endless fees, no more constant fights about paint colors and lawn heights. For them, selling wasn't just a business deal. It was freedom. And for me, it was the sweetest revenge. Months passed, and the HOA board grew more confident. They paraded around in their meetings, bragging about upcoming negotiations for my 2,000 acres. They had no idea that half the people they were supposedly representing now answered to me. The moment came when I knew I had enough. Enough houses, enough land, enough power to drop the truth like a hammer. So I walked into one of their board meetings, calm, collected, like I had done so many times before. They barely looked at me, probably assuming I was just there to listen quietly. But this time was different. The HOA president cleared his throat and began talking about how they were close to securing a deal for my land. The arrogance in his voice made my blood boil, but I kept my smile. And when he finished, I slowly stood up. You know, I said, loud enough for every person in that room to hear. It's funny you keep talking about selling something that never belonged to you, but I think it's time the community knows the truth. They looked confused, annoyed. Some rolled their eyes, expecting another one of my objections. But then I pulled out the stack of papers I had brought with me. Deeds, contracts, property titles. One by one, I laid them on the table. This house? Mine. That property across the street? Mine. The one with the 3-car garage? Mine. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, about 70% of this neighborhood now belongs to me. Silence. Dead silence. You could have heard a pin drop. The board members' smug smiles vanished, replaced with shock, panic, and disbelief. And then, the final blow. I leaned forward, looked the HOA president straight in the eyes, and said, "You wanted to sell my land. Instead, I bought your entire neighborhood. Which means from this day forward, you don't own me. I own you." You should have seen their faces. Years of arrogance, control, and bullying, all wiped away in a single moment. Homeowners in the room started whispering, some even smiling, because finally, someone had stood up to the HOA and won. Not just won, completely flipped the script. From that day on, the HOA's power was broken. They couldn't find me. They couldn't harass me. They couldn't do anything without going through me first. The board members who once acted like kings and queens, they were nothing more than tenants in a neighborhood I controlled, and the land they tried to steal, untouched, safe, still mine and always will be. But let me tell you the real victory. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing every single homeowner in that community that they didn't have to live in fear, that HOAs are not untouchable, that sometimes the biggest bullies fall the hardest when someone refuses to bow down. So next time someone tries to take what's yours, remember this. Patience is power. Knowledge is power. And the quiet moves you make behind the scenes, they can shake the ground under people who thought they were untouchable. Because in the end, the HOA thought they could sell me out, but instead, I bought them out. And that's a lesson they'll never forget. Backhand index point right if you loved hearing how I turned the tables on an entire HOA. Don't just stop here. Share this story. Let others know that bullies can be beaten, and make sure you never miss the next battle I take on. Because trust me, this isn't the only time someone tried to cross me, and the next story might just blow your mind.